Hey everybody, so we're back with more updates on the ICBM project. So it's been 2 months since the last video, so I'm probably going to miss some features that have been worked on. In general, most of what's been worked on is small polishing fixes, improvements, adjustments, that kind of stuff. Making it so that these work just a little bit better, we get different effects, things look nicer, function nicer, stuff like tooltip improvements, so we have indentation now, a little bit more line breaking, and one of the things you'll notice right away is that there's ability now with a cancel mark over top of the radio. You now have the ability when you do alt click to enable and disable the radio. Now this isn't all that particularly useful, and it's going to come in more use with some of the other functionality and features. But for those of you that are worried about somebody sneaking your base and figuring out what your radio signal is and then launching your own missiles on you, you can come in here and just turn this on and off and do stuff like that. Beyond that, more tooltip adjustments, more status screen updates. So this will now tell you the number of launchers that are not ready. I do hope that as I go down the road, get this to a point where there will be another screen that'll show you all of your different launchers and what they're actively doing. But this is a little bit cleaner to read than being just shown the first one with an error, what's going on with that one, and so on, because it's not really helpful in that regard. There has some improvements how the energy system itself works. This probably won't be the most noticeable because it's not going to really make a huge difference there, but the code's a lot more cleaner, getting it closer, so that way when we do update, we aren't having to carry around as much, baggage code and so on. And in terms of like other changes, like if anyone is interested, you can easily go through our code, or you can even go through the changelog to figure out kind of what we've been working on. Changelog itself is available not only in the code, but every time we do release, we do copy this out to the releases on CurseForge. So you can see kind of what I'm working on here. I have been working on a lot of configs, so almost all of the explosives are now configurable on size and scale. Do toy with this in a local before setting this up on your servers, as some explosives scale well, some of them do not. Ones that you're going to have issues scaling are going to be any ones that are spawning any kind of particles or entities. So like the fragmentation don't scale very well because the scaling is the number of fragments that they are launching. This means you could result in some pretty horrible server performance. This is more of a Minecraft issue than ICBM itself, as it has to do with a little bit of the collision logic. So all of the arrows are spawning in roughly the same position and then pushing outwards, so they will collide with each other, which will cause some weirdness as they try to figure out how to push each other sideways, and so on. This goes for pretty much every other one. So do toy with them as you go. Other things we've had, just minor changes, like you guys can go through here, kind of figure out what's going on, so on. There's been some bug fixes, there's been implementation of delay mechanics. This is one I just about forgot, so let me go ahead and show you how this one works. So right now you now have a UI on here. For those who have not seen the previous videos, you have UIs on the launcher platform. So this is the launcher. For those who are used to the multi-blocks are gone. You now have singular blocks. You now have the ability to pretty much add as many launchers as you want connected to the screens. This is now the new screen. You can do that and so on. But from here you can actually set lock height, groups, so on. Group feature is not in there yet. You will see it's got tooltips. You will see it's talking about chainfire. It's not really set up yet. It probably is going to be more useful with some of the add-ons right now than it is going to be with the main core mod. But delay, you come in here and set the number of ticks. For those who are not familiar with what a tick is, for a single second of real world time, the game will cycle 20 times. So to do 20 world updates. So this is how we do everything. We can't go faster than that because we can't do like, even smaller seconds. So it's like every 50 milliseconds or so on. So in this case, I've got it set for 5 ticks. I've got this one set for 0. I've got this one set for 10, and I've got this one set for 15. So what I can do, let me move that to that tab just because I can't actually see my toolbar because I've got another monitor blocking it. But I can go ahead and do that. I can put those in there and I can click launch, and you'll notice how they start to tick up at a slightly different rate. So the delay is very useful if you are worried about them colliding with each other. So if you're doing like big packs like this, it's really nice there. It's also great for just displays. So it's really nice if you want to do really complex displays, have your missiles look very beautiful when they're going off, and so on and so on. So you have a lot of time with that. It's also nice for doors and stuff. Say for example, if this was controlled by redstone, you could have a redstone come in, turn this on and get this ready for launch, have a delay of like 20 seconds, long enough for your door to open up above, or a force field to turn off, or any other mechanic you want to work with to move out of the way so that your missile could fire and launch, or so on and so on. There's so much multitude you can do with just this delay mechanic. Now with that, on the coding side, anybody who wants to do add-ons, The targeting data itself allows for delay, so if you do not want to have to set this in the UI and you say want to have like a remote system trigger this, especially for the ComputerCraft add-on, you can actually send and tell it to, hey, I want to delay by 200, 300, so on, and programmatically kind of do it that way. For users, this is the only way to be able to do it is via this actual screen. The hope is, as we go on, we're going to have more blocks that are going to add more support for this. And for those of you who forget how many ticks are in a second, it will tell you everywhere I talk about ticks. I will almost always put that note in there because people do forget. So that gets us that feature going through here. Let me see if I can pull this up. I really should have not stuck a second monitor in front of my other monitor because I've got my work computer in front of my personal computer, which makes it really challenging to like tab around now. But if I can pop over to the changelog, okay, that's the ComputerCraft add-on, which we're going to show next. Yeah, so delays. There is a mechanic for doing fuses that's not implemented yet. So if you guys see that in there, it's not there. Inventory fix issues was the last big thing. So it covers most of it because the rest of it's pretty much just the rework itself, which I showed off in the previous video, doing all that kind of stuff. And there's like a huge log here, and I guarantee I've missed so much stuff in that because there's a lot of features. Now for the other side of this, which let me go ahead and kill the one you were just looking at. And we'll flip over to the ComputerCraft add-on. So I've got these as separate projects. If I thought about this a little better and actually did some scripting and planning for this video, I would have had this all in one world and had like little scenes I could switch between and be like, hey, we're going to look at this thing, and so on. In the future, I will think about doing that. For now, I just wanted to go through and get these kind of shown off just so you guys are aware of what features are being added for those who do watch these videos and don't just have to read the changelog yourself. You can kind of see some hints at it over here where I'm working on that group ID and index, because the features I'm going to show you are kind of preliminary. They are released, you can use them. I'm still working through the ComputerCraft add-on itself. This was just kind of spur of the moment. I'm just like, I really want to work on this type of thing. So there's honestly better features I should be working on. We probably will not be doing an Open Computers add-on because I just learned here a little bit ago that only has a 1.12 version and does not have versions past that. There's apparently a mod that I think the same developers are working on. I think it's called TIC, but that one looks way overly complicated, so I'll probably leave that for somebody else to work on. So we'll look at that. But for the ComputerCraft add-on, if it says you're not familiar with ComputerCraft, it's a little block you can actually work with that has its own operating system written in Lua. You can place it next to other machines and use them as peripherals. For those who've never heard the word peripheral, back in the ancient days of computers, we used to have a thing called a peripheral port, and you would actually plug in devices to it. That's been recently replaced by things like serial port, which then got replaced by USB and other types of forms of connection. But ideally, a peripheral is just any device you connect, so such as like a printer, a scanner, stuff like that. More modern times, peripherals are basically monitors now, because you can literally have a USB-C port that has a peripheral monitor. You can plug in keyboards, mice, so on. I don't think those are all considered peripherals in itself, although ComputerCraft does consider this all peripherals, but it gets down to definitions. So radar station, cruise launcher, launcher base, and EMP tower do have ComputerCraft support. Actually, no, EMP tower does not. I have not implemented that yet. But these three blocks you see in front of us do have different things. So I can go ahead and edit our scripts. And this one, let's see, we're on radar one. I have all three of these computers wired to the same folder, so they all have the same scripts. But you can go ahead and just wrap it. So peripheral.wrap, tell it what side you want to use it on. And then I've got some test scripts here. So I'm debugging methods, I'm debugging machine info. Most of the time when you're working with this, you're only going to be looking at very specific key points unless you're doing something more complicated. The majority of players who are working with ComputerCraft are, for at least when it comes to radar, are only going to care about the contacts method. And I'll go through the methods here shortly and show what they are and how they work. But for contacts, you will get basically a table of different, entities it detects. The entity information you will get will be hyper limited. That's probably the word hyper does not fit there, but it'll be limited in nature because of the fact that I want to make sure the radars are not telling you exactly what's going on. One, the radars themselves don't actually know what they're looking at most of the time. They know that they have some dot that they're looking at, which is a contact, and they know based on its direction if it's a threat or not. Now I'm doing a little bit more in the code in terms of the Java side of going like, is this a missile or not? Just because it makes the radar function easier. But down the road in the future, it may not know what a missile is. It may just know that based on the radar signature and based on its speed, that this thing coming in is a very high probability of being a threat to the location that's detecting on. And there may be other settings. So when it comes from a user perspective of non-computer craft, there may then be in the future like a shape list, and you go like, okay, based on this shape, based on, you know, it being metallic and it moving at high speeds, the probability of it being projectiles is really high. Because that's how radars kind of work in real life, is they keep like signature data, and based on the signature data, they can roughly guess what they're looking at. So they can tell the difference between a MiG and a, you know, an F-15 and so on. And then combined with other sensories like cameras, infrared, stuff like that, they can pretty much like figure out exactly what they're seeing at any given time. When it comes to what we're doing, we're trying to mimic that behavior. So what you'll get is the context, and you'll get a count. So the count's just there to make it a little bit easier, so you don't have to like figure out the size. But it'll go ahead and print out, so you can loop over it, so you'll get a key value pair. The key is just going to be like the index. The value is going to be your actual entry data. And then the entry data itself is going to have various information on it. You're going to get XYZ, and then you're going to get the size, height, and the size width of the entity. You're not going to get what the entity ID is. I'm going to try to add material later, but we don't have a system for that yet, and so on. But let me go ahead and we'll exit out this script, and I'll go ahead and run it. So this is what it'll produce. I don't know how to scroll up inside of computer craft stuff, but you'll get a variety of information. Now, right now you see it doesn't detect stuff, but it'll show you like things like trigger range in the script. So you can do energy data, which is a good way to get your min-max. You can grab each of those individual values. You also can get the detection range, trigger ranges. You can set those ranges. You can get all kinds of cool little bits and pieces. But what I can do is, if I can grab a rocket launcher here, I can fire this off, and I can run that script again, and you'll see it will detect the two entities. Now, one of the problems I'm currently having with it that I haven't managed to fix yet is I can't get these IDs ordered. I have tried a tree map inside the Java side, but apparently Computer Craft doesn't care. But you will see it's got XYZ, and then size, width, and size height. Missiles are generally 0.5 on their collision box. This is somewhat of a problem when it comes to the radar detection, because the reality is the missiles are much larger than that visually. So down the road, what you'll probably end up seeing is some kind of shape library get implemented, where it'll go, this missile is like a box shaped of this size according to the radar. And it'll come into more play, like we'll probably do like direction orientations and a whole bunch of other stuff. So you'll end up getting a little bit more information down the road from this, and you'll be able from that write scripts to kind of calculate what you're looking at. And I will try to figure out ways to make it so you can not only to figure out it's a missile, you can figure out what tier it is, and probably even the explosive type. Well, the explosive type might come into play, like you can kind of like narrow it down to like 4 different types, and then from there you'll have to combine it with other sensors, because we will be adding things like infrared sensors, ultraviolet sensors, and even radioactive sensors to do detection. That'll probably come as part of the radar rewrite. Because what we'll end up doing is we'll have the radar rewrite, but then the radar rewrite will open it up to have different sensors connected to a computer system, and from there it'll just feed more data into a more central block, and the central block will go, hey, I detect this entity coming in, and here's everything about this entity, and it'll tell you like, here's my radar contact information, here's the infrared signature, here's the radioactive signature, and you can go, okay, that's guaranteed a nuke coming in. We should probably prioritize that with a AB missile. But if it's like a conventional missile coming in, you can go, okay, just ignore it, the shields will take the hit, and so on. That shows off kind of the radar signature and kind of that. Cruise launcher, same way. There's scripts for that one, which let me show the scripts off inside of this code over here, because it's a little easier to read them. But yeah, so here's the cruise launcher test. Same general idea. I've got some debug data going on here, but with the cruise launcher, you get the ability to do things like grabbing the aim position, grabbing the target position, figuring out current aim versus expected aim, ability to actually set the target, launch the missile, get an accuracy, pre-check status, so on. Again, I'll show the whole list up here. You can kind of see that general script. Same with a launcher, same general ideal, slightly different commands. So let me go ahead and pop over here again, so I can run that as well. Assuming this wants to, there it is, cruise test. So you'll see it'll do various things. You'll see it run through, and it'll do pre-launch and go. It's aiming at target, so it's kind of ready to go. But what I can do to kind of show this is actually working is I can set this for like 2000, and you can see it's kind of over there. And I come in here and I can run that again. It actually does set the target, and it will aim at the position. Now you will get some unknown errors out of this, just as because Cruise Launcher doesn't handle the status system properly, and you have access to the status system for Computer Craft. This will be fixed over time. It just, I have to go through and I have to finish working on the Cruise Launcher. Cruise Launcher got a little bit less love during the launcher rewrite than the launcher base itself got. Now launcher base, on the other hand over here, if I come over here and actually run it, so launcher test, it'll do the same thing, but you'll see it's actually saying firing in 20 seconds. So we'll keep in mind that there's delays. We'll keep in mind the delay you're passing in. So in my case, I am passing a delay of 5. It will then add to that delay of 15 on the launcher. So if I come in here and set this to, actually it's going to get overridden, but if I change these values, we can look at it. So that's 5 and 12, make sure that it's actually keeping it. Run the script. It will actually reset those for me because this one thing's actually setting a lot of that information. And it won't actually fire it in my case because I have it set to simulate mode. So with this, you can actually simulate the missile firings and it will tell you what the launching is going to do. You won't get information back like time to target, stuff like that yet. And you will also not be told its flight path, but I will try to add some more logic for that as we go. Now, in terms of the actual methods, I can kind of show you what that list looks like. For those who are not familiar with Java code, I mean, it still should be somewhat easy to understand. I need to go peripheral provider. So I'm using my own custom peripheral builder for this. It is using the peripheral provider interface from ComputerCraft, which basically is nothing fancy. It's pretty much just like what methods do you pertain, what is your type, and then just ability to call those methods. So I was like, hey, I don't want to manually implement this, so I went ahead and built a peripheral provider. So by default, we have a set of stuff that's going to be available to all machines. That's going to be getting your energy information, getting your machine info. The machine info is just going to be some random facts about the machine. So it's going to be things like config settings, how much energy does it use, so on. This is entirely up to the machine to provide that information. I will try to document it on the wiki so you guys can easily get access to that information so you know what your version is going to have. I also do plan to put inside machine info the version of the mod so you can change your script to match your mod versions and so on. And that way, so if you make a script, you can say, okay, well, version 5.4 had this method, but in 5.5 we have this method. You just switch between them. That is automatically going to be extended by launchers. So launcher is going to have a set of methods available, and then your things like radar. So radar is going to have detection range. Why is that detection range twice? Oh, second detection range. My brain failed and read the S as a G. But yeah, so you can get detection range, set detection range, same with trigger range, and you can get your contact list. Contacts allows for taking, I believe, a few different things. Yeah, you can supply true to get only incoming threats in the trigger area. You also can specify a limit, so if you only care about like the first 5 entries, you can actually ask for the first 5 entries. It is going to default for the first 10 because the radar can easily watch like 10,000 targets, although you'd be lagging out really bad if it has 10,000 targets, but it could have a huge list. I don't want to convert that all to ComputerCraft data and then have ComputerCraft itself crash. So there's a default limit. You guys can set it higher, just please be respectful on that limit. If you do start doing stupid stuff, I'm going to have to put a limit back in here to keep servers from crashing. In terms of other things, so yep, so you saw this. Cruise launcher, get target, set target, is aim. So is aim going to be a true, false? It's going to just say, are we currently looking at the target? This will not always be consistent in terms of the actual visual matches the aiming position because it could be off by like a whole degree. And you'll see this in the get aim current and aim at target. These two rarely ever actually match each other. So if you are working with this and you're writing some script to determine like percentage of movement or something like that, keep in mind that when current gets close enough to target, it will stop rotating. It'll just go, hey, I'm not going to bother. These don't sync up 100% just because of rounding and decimals and floating points. They could be off by a little bit. So just keep that in mind. The system mostly cares about whole numbers, even though it will give you decimals. Then base has got get lock height, set lock height, and so on. There's not a huge amount of extra features launchers actually have over top of normal. So by default, normal is going to be able to give you missiles. Currently, get missiles is going to give back a single object. In the future, this could be an array of missiles, there will be launchers that can support more than one missile. Especially, we're going to be adding a version of cruise launcher that has like 3 or 4 or so on. I actually might just make cruise launcher customizable, where you click like a plus button, you go, hey, I want this to be a 2 silo, 3 silo, 4 silo cruise launcher turret. So we'll work on that, and that might happen. So you'll see this change at some point in the future. Everything else will pretty much be the same. Launch will still take target data, and true false for simulate. So true will be simulate the missile, false will be to fire it for real. And accuracy will probably take target data always. Get status is just going to be normal, there's no inputs, and then pre-launch will take the target as well. So that should work. You may see additional information come back out here. But either way, that's most of the features being added in the upcoming releases. I'll come back with more videos in the future to show off how some of these mechanics work and some more examples as we go.